And welcome back to the Sportsnaut interview. And today we are joined by our college football insider, Crissy Froyd, and we'll be talking week 4 takeaways from college football. And it's crazy to think that we are now about a quarter of the way through the season, and we are entering the final weekend of September. There's a lot to discuss with you here, Crissy. So let's jump into it now. I want to start with one of the matchups that we discussed last week. We had USC heading to the Big House to take on Michigan. Now, I think a lot of people were surprised with the outcome of that game. I know you said USC you thought would win that game. I think a lot of people would agree with you. I thought they would win that game too, but it turns out Michigan was able to get it done at the end. They offensively, it was all run, right? No pass in this game, which I don't know how many more big time football games they can win like that, but they were able to get it done this week. Some of your thoughts on Michigan beating USC?
Yeah, I think that Navy and Army are actually the only two teams in existence that have beat AP top 25 teams over at least a certain period of time with 32 passing yards or less. So it was kind of interesting. I mean, we know what Army and Navy do and how they're kind of unique in the way that they run their offense, which is basically like quarterbackless, is what it feels like. So to see Michigan join the ranks of that is quite interesting. I do think that the stat line didn't do justice how much the switch from Davis Warren to Alex Orji really did make. I think that really helped to propel their offense because before Michigan was kind of struggling with turnovers and some things that just needed to happen, needed not to happen. They were just not playing very clean football. And I think that was the biggest problem. I thought that USC was going to beat Michigan by a large margin. And maybe it's only because I said that Michigan decided to finally show up as Michigan. That was the biggest talk of this matchup beforehand is Michigan seemed to have lost its identity. It's like JJ McCarthy and Harbaugh went out the door. And what is Michigan now? They didn't look anything like the Wolverines that we knew before. And the heart and soul of this, and Alex Orji said this after the game too, Michigan is known for hard-nosed bully defense and then also having a very strong run game. And that was something that showed up in a really big way against USC. And I think maybe even USC wasn't expecting to see that. None of us were. But at the same time, this was a very, very toughly fought game. I think what really made the difference in the end as USC was coming back, and it looked like USC was actually going to win the game, is the USC offensive line proved no match for Michigan's just really aggressive defensive line. And so Miller Moss, a lot of people came after Miller Moss. He did have that one really horrible interception, but outside of that, I mean, I thought that he played really great and that he got no help and had no time to throw the entire time. So if anyone's faulting him, they're wrong.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, it was kind of an old school get back to what they do best for Michigan, run the football, only 12 passing attempts in this game. Now, for me, and I don't know if you agree with this or not, but at least in my opinion, it kind of felt like it was a missed opportunity for USC. Now, coming into the Big Ten, a chance to take down the defending national champs. It was a big game on the week, going into Michigan. I know that, USC won the game earlier in the season versus LSU, which was a big statement win for them. But I just thought that to go into the Big House and knock off Michigan would have been a big statement win for them in their first Big Ten game. To me, it felt like a missed opportunity.
Yeah, I think it was to a certain extent, but the way that they were able to compete still makes it respectable to me. But yeah, I mean, if they were able to come in and pull that off, that would have been a real game changer for them that they did miss just by a few points.
The other takeaway from the week that I want to ask you about was Travis Hunter's performance. I mean, a lot of people, and I spoke to some people, they all had, Travis Hunter as their top player this year in college football. We all know he plays on both sides of the ball, but, can you just talk about his performance, what we saw from him? Not only did he have several catches for over 100 yards receiving, but he came up with that big time play in overtime to essentially win the game for Colorado.
Yeah, you almost feel bad for Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter because they're basically the only two really, really solid players on that entire team, and they get no help from virtually outside of a few people, much of anything around them, which is why Colorado has this immense talent, yet finds itself in overtime games like this and situations like this all the time. The whole thing with Colorado ever since last year, it's all smoke. Everyone before the season, it's like, oh, Deion Sanders is going to revolutionize Colorado, and then it never happens. What he did at Jackson State, I thought was great, really put them on the map, but it's not been able to replicate itself to this point. There's a lot that needs to change over there. But as far as Travis Hunter goes and his performance, I think it's just a matter of the versatility. There are very he's like a unicorn. I mean, there's very few players that are able to play on both sides of the ball at an elite level in college football at that level of college football. So I think that it's just Travis Hunter being Travis Hunter. And I think that if Colorado doesn't have Travis Hunter, they probably win half the games that they still managed to win anyway.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. What a difference a couple of weeks makes for Clemson. I mean, I remember after their loss to Georgia, you and I discussed them. We thought the program was definitely headed in the right direction, but 2 weeks since that time, they beat up on a pretty good Appalachian State team, scored 66 points on them, and then dropped 59 points on NC State. It looks like Cade Klubnik and Dabo Sweeney have this program going back in the right direction now. But what do you think about them?
Yeah, I think that everyone wrote off Clemson a little bit too early, and maybe that's just a testament to Georgia's dominance. And then also, it is the season opener, so knocking off the West against the best team in the nation is not easy. And I think that didn't really click in the minds of several people. But at the same time, I think there were also very legitimate questions at that time about the way that Dabo Sweeney did not correctly utilize the transfer portal and how Clemson had this same stale offense that doesn't work, and no one was willing to change anything. So I think that it definitely is headed in the right direction, but at the same time, there's also going to be people who very validly say, who have they actually played ever since then? Not really anybody. So I think we have to wait for the next big test to really tell. But I mean, to say that they're not on the up, I mean, you really can't say that they're not. And I think that especially for Cade Klubnik, that's a very big step in the right direction for him, because I mean, he just did not, at the very beginning of the Georgia game, he looked really good, but then throughout the rest of it, just did not look great at all.
Yeah, and Cade Klubnik has thrown 8 touchdown passes in his last 2 games, so definitely trending in the right direction with him. How about the surprise Illinois Fighting Illini? I mean, not a team that people talk about a lot nationally. They won 5 games last year, and they've already picked up their 4th win of the season. They went into Nebraska and knocked off the Cornhuskers on Friday night in overtime. Very exciting game. Already 2 top 25 wins on their resume. They have a chance to add another one this week against Penn State, number 9 Penn State. I don't know if the winning ways will continue for Illinois, but for now, for Brett Bielema, it's a good story, and he has that program also headed in the right direction. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there are just throughout my time covering college football, I've seen some of these games where Illinois kind of comes in as just kind of a sneaky team to watch out for. You said that they won 5 games last year. That wasn't great, but I mean, they're clearly in a good direction right now. And they had said something about how they use the approach of trying to wear Nebraska down, and that was kind of their game plan going into this. And clearly, it worked. And going up against Dylan Raiola, they also did mention the head coach and then people from the team were talking about how, even though they were able to stifle him, I mean, he did give them fits. This is one of the better quarterbacks in the nation, but it came down basically based on what was said and the way that it looked is just playing a good team as the underdog. It's playing a solid 4-quarter game. And I mean, there was the overtime that they had to go through, but I mean, as far as if this team is truly underrated, Penn State is going to be a test, but at the same time, I think there's definitely potential here because Penn State did look beatable whenever they almost got beat by Bowling Green. But at the same time, Bowling Green is almost a little bit intriguing to me because Bowling Green also almost beat Texas A&M. So it's kind of like the NIU Notre Dame situation. Like, what does this tell us more about this team or this other team? So definitely going to be a storyline to keep track of.
Getting back to Illinois, I mentioned they play Penn State this week. That schedule looks brutal over the next couple weeks. They have games with Penn State, Purdue, Michigan, and Oregon. So we'll see if they can continue, the winning ways there, as I mentioned. I want to also ask you about the SEC and their dominance. Right now, if you look at the top 25 rankings, the SEC have 5 of the top 6 teams right now. You also have Missouri, who actually fell a couple spots in the rankings. They're down to 11 now, despite winning in week 4. They fell out. And then you have LSU in the SEC, also number 14. So just a complete domination right now by the SEC. It looks like they could get maybe 5-6 teams into the playoff. I mean, I know there's still a long ways to go. But again, just complete dominance right now by the SEC. Some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the SEC, especially given what we thought was going to be a really weak group of quarterbacks, is performing as a whole a lot better than we really thought that they would. I think that with Quinn Ewers and the run that Texas made, that there was a lot of intrigue surrounding Texas. But I do think there were very few people that expected Texas to be ranked as the #1 team in the nation this early on. And I do think that as far as the matchups that are upcoming, Alabama could throw a wrench in things and shake everything up as far as the top 10 goes. But to me, as far as determining who the best team in the SEC is going to be, I believe that whenever all is said and done, this is going to be a battle between Georgia and Texas. But I mean, there's a lot of teams that have really proven themselves. Like, I mean, no one expected Kentucky to almost beat Georgia. No one expected South Carolina to do what it did. So I think we're seeing quality of play across the entire conference is a lot better than anyone really gave it respect for in the offseason.
Well, before we can get to Georgia and Texas, we have to talk about our game of the week, and that is Georgia and Alabama, which is a huge game right now on the docket this week. The biggest game of the season so far. Number 2 versus number 4. I know you'll be covering this one closely. I know that Georgia has comes into this game with a couple guys who are injured on the defense. One of their star defensive ends, Mikael Williams. I'm not sure if you know the latest on him and his status, but again, just some of your thoughts on this big time SEC matchup with Alabama and Georgia this week.
Yeah, the other injury to watch out for is Tate Ratledge, which could make a really big difference up front. That is one of Georgia's most important pieces, not only on the football field, but as a leadership figure. So I think that him going down truly is devastating. And if this is a closely contended game, it could end up making a difference. But I think what this one comes down to is going to be primarily the quarterback matchup between Jalen Milroe and Carson Beck. Jalen Milroe is considered to largely be in the top 10 by most people. Carson Beck was considered to be the best quarterback in the nation. There are some people that are deciding to put Cam Ward in front of him, which I think Cam Ward is lighting up the stat sheet. Cam Ward's done a lot of really good things, but I think as far as translating to the NFL, I still view Carson Beck as the better quarterback just in that crop. So the other thing is, I mean, offensive sputtering has been an issue for both teams at certain points in time, and particularly in the first half for Georgia. We look at the Clemson game and we look at the Kentucky game. I think whenever you have a game like this, you really can't have that in the first half unless you're able to truly come back in a really big way in the second half. And Georgia didn't exactly show the ability to put up a lot of points in the second half and make a run like they did on Clemson against Kentucky. So if Georgia gets into that type of situation, the Bulldogs could be in trouble. But I believe that the team that plays the best clean football, turnovers are going to be a huge thing in this. Those are just the things that I think are the factors that are going to determine what's going to happen here. But I do think that Georgia comes out on top by a small margin. But I think when you get to the fourth quarter, it's probably going to be a defensive showdown.
Yeah, and it'll be the first installment of the Kirby Smart versus Kalen DeBoer era here. It should be a really exciting one. She is Crissy Ford. She is our college football insider. You can follow her on X at Crissy_Froyd. Crissy, thank you again so much for all your insight, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Absolutely. Thank you.